Most of the Nets seemed like they were sitting this one out, but the ones that were left brought all of the effort you could ever want and more. Brooklyn ultimately falls 118-113 to the Milwaukee Bucks. But the story of this game was how hard the guys who were left fought, how hard that bench fought, and how much they even possibly broke a record in doing it. It goes down as a loss in the win-loss column, but you have to commend the effort from the Brooklyn Nets in this one. We're going to break it all down right after the theme music.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome back to the Locked On Nets podcast on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team, the Brooklyn Nets, every single day. I am Doug Norrie, the owner and operator of DFSR.com. That's Daily Fantasy Sports Rankings.com. If you need projections or bets for FanDuel or DraftKings, go check out DFSR.com. We got you covered over there. Hit up the chat room, too. I'll be over in there most nights talking hoops. No Adam Armbrecht on the podcast today, fresh off of his talk with Kane Pittman. That one ground them down going into the Bucks game. It's okay. We're going to roll this one solo post game following a 118-113 loss by the Brooklyn Nets to the Milwaukee Bucks. And we have a ton to talk about in this game. The place you have to start is the effort. What you hope for every night when you're watching a game, there's two things you hope for. One, you didn't get in this one because you hope that you're going to see some superstars playing a basketball game. That did not happen in this game. Giannis, depends where you want to land, Drew or Mikal. But no Giannis in this game. Obviously, if you were a Bucks fan way early in the season, you think you're buying tickets for Giannis versus Durant. It's going to be Giannis and Drew versus Durant and Kyrie. That's what you think you're going to get when you buy those tickets earlier in the season. And then when it finally gets down to it, sometimes injuries and sometimes circumstance and all this other stuff gets in the way of, what your dreams are when you think you're about to watch a basketball game and you end up getting no Giannis. You get the rest of the Bucks in this one. And then you get a Nets team that effectively is, I don't even want to call it the B team. I mean, you're on the C and D team, not by grades, just levels of where you are in this one. And the Nets sort of signaled early what they were going to do, which was not play the, important guys. I guess I'll put that in quotes, important guys, a lot of minutes. And they're going to end up running essentially the very, very end of the bench and what amounts to their G League team in a game against the Bucks. And it's just such a weird thing with how this can happen sometimes in the NBA. And the script, as it usually is written out, means that this game is a double-digit victory for Milwaukee. It's well over. Maybe you get a little scrappiness out of this Nets team. But, I mean, from a talent standpoint, what's the expectation here? We're talking Drew Smith and David Duke Jr. against Drew Holiday, Brook Lopez, Chris Middleton, Bobby Portis, guys like this. This game should be an absolute and complete blowout. And the Nets, as they have done multiple times this season with a variety of different players, put up a fight that makes the other team really sweat. They have won a couple of these games already this season, either through big comebacks, or if you think back to that Pacers game back in, I believe, in December, where it was just the bench unit and they pulled the game out. This one, the Nets had no business being in this game at all with the players they were running. And Jacques Vaughn leads a group that continues to fight all the way through. Now, we'll talk about if they should have just stuck with this plan all the way through the game. I think there's a real question about that, which I definitely want to talk about going forward here, is that just because the guys get you back in, should they be the ones that carry you home? But when you talk about putting up an effort in an NBA game and watching another team really sweat in front of their home crowd, because it would be among the most embarrassing losses of the season to lose to this Nets group at home, you have to give the Nets a little credit in there. It's a loss is a loss. The Nets could use all the wins they could get now to avoid the play-in game. You'd like to stick at this point into where their playoff seeding is. You don't want to have to sweat out maybe no playoffs, although maybe not the worst thing in the world, but still these wins do count, and this will never count as a win. There are no moral victories in pro sports. You're paid to win. That should be the modus operandi, and that really should be almost always what you're evaluated on. And there are sometimes where I think we can look and say, hey, these guys were put in a situation that would be almost insurmountable by any measure. Take a look at just at betting markets where these games are going to sit -13, -14, something like that. Live betting at a lot higher when it comes to just where the actual real number between the talents of the two teams sit. The Nets had no business keeping this close. Not only did they have no business keeping it close, they had no business outscoring the Bucks 66-54 in the second half. Pulling this game to within 2 points in critical moments, having a challenge call not go their way, right? Having the ball bounce a few, wrong directions late in the game where they probably could have maybe made this game a tie or even taken the lead. There was no business for any of that to happen in this game, just based on the players that were playing on one side of the ball for Milwaukee and the players that were playing on the other side of the ball for the Nets. These things just aren't really supposed to happen, except when you get one team full of guys that are out there trying to pretty much only prove themselves at this point. Nerlens Noel on a 10-day contract. Drew Smith, G League. David Duke Jr., 2-way G League. Day'Ron Sharpe, G League. Patty Mills, buried. End of the bench, veteran, comes back out and gives one of the best performances that he's had all season. Yuta Watanabe, full max effort on some of these, getting on the board, still has something to prove. Edmond Sumner, who's been out with personal stuff with the birth of a child, has also been kind of buried. He gets in there and gets absolute max effort. And then you get Cam Thomas, who we'll also talk about, who just remains one of the weirdest stories in the league at this point, just about what's going on, who probably, I think every single night that guy feels like he has something to prove when he actually steps on the court. So you get guys that go out there and all have something on a personal level that they probably want to be able to take care of and know that there's no point in taking their foot off the gas at any point in the game, and you just get a few balls to bounce your way, a few 3-pointers to go in, a few drives to the basket that work, and you get a game that I thought I was going to come onto this podcast and have, you'd have to be toweling me off if they had actually pulled this game out. I'm not sure we would have burned this thing down. This would have been one of the coolest wins of the entire season had they been able to pull it off. And I actually can't even talk too negatively about the effort by the players on the court. Yes, I think we can talk a little negatively about the strategy. I definitely have complaints about that on a high level. But from the effort from the players that were actually on the court, what can you do? You can't complain at all. You can only give praise. There's really only praise to be given here. When a closing group of David Duke Jr., Patty Mills, Cam Thomas, Day'Ron Sharpe, these guys are out there keeping the Bucks sweating all the way to the end. It doesn't count as a win in the wins and loss column, but it counts for something in the effort column. And it counts, I think, a little something, at least from the motivation piece from Jacques Vaughn, that this is a team that still wants to fight, and this is a team that will not give up, even when all reasonable metrics, reasonable numbers, and just reasonable fans would say, this thing is over. There's no hope. You're going to get killed. And then that's really, really put up an effort. So I want to talk a little bit about some of the stuff that happened in this game as well. Do want to have a few bones to pick with just sort of on a high strategic level about like what kind of happens here on these back-to-backs and like the expectation around the NBA about what you should be doing in these games, or even just what it's okay to do in these games on a team level. Going to talk about all of that in a second. But first, have to let you know that this show is sponsored by our friends over at BetterHelp. Getting to know yourself can be a lifelong process because we're always growing, we're always changing. I know this, but therapy is all about deepening your self-awareness and understanding. Sometimes we don't know what we want, or we're just reacting the way we do until we have to talk through things. BetterHelp connects you with a licensed therapist who can take you on that journey of self-discovery from wherever you are. If you're learning coping skills, you're learning how to set boundaries, you're learning just to be self-empowered, just be the best version of yourself. If you maybe experienced some major setbacks in your life, BetterHelp is there for you. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online. It's designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. You just got to fill out a brief questionnaire, get matched with a licensed therapist, and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Discover your potential with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA today to get 10% off of your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. All right. I believe I have this number correct. And I tried double checking and triple checking it and tweeted it out to just see if I could get any confirmation on it. But I believe that the Nets bench tonight set the all-time record for most bench points in a game. As far as I could tell, the previous record was 1977, 94 points by the Golden State Warriors. In this game, the Nets ended up scoring 98 points because the starters only scored 15 points. Mikal Bridges had 10 points. Seth Curry had 5 points. Dorian Finney-Smith, 0. Joe Harris, 0. Nerlens Noel, 0. So they had 15 points. And they put up 113 total. I'm pretty sure this is the record. Now, look, these records back in the day, this kind of thing could never have happened. Like, it would have been, frankly, embarrassing in a previous versions of the NBA for games to go off like this, where guys start and, 3 dudes play 10 minutes and score 0 points. Your quasi best player, possibly a superstar, and Mikal Bridges gets out there, scores 10 and 12 minutes and never sees the court again. Felt a lot like for Mikal, they were keeping that Iron Man consecutive game streak alive for him. And maybe they just were. I'm like, maybe that's not even a secret. He's at 375 straight games played in his career right now, when really every other functional player except for Dorian Finney-Smith got this game off. Mikal Bridges played 12 minutes. It did feel like a keeping the lights on kind of thing with Bridges and that record. And I don't care. It's a bigger problem on a higher NBA level, like that we'll talk about soon. But I think that's why Bridges got to get out and get a little bit of run here more than and the rest of these guys sat. But the bench was the whole team here, and we'll double check and triple check this. And again, I didn't see it anywhere else, but I looked it up and I believe that's the number. Looks like the Nets will go down in the record book for most bench points in a game. Is that a great thing? I'm not sure. I don't know if that's a record you want to have. It's a little weird because it's like, well, the guys who did it maybe can pat themselves on the back. It says a little bit of a weird thing about your team where your bench is able to score that many points. It's like, well, what exactly happened that the bench in regulation was allowed to take this many shots or play this many minutes? And I think there's, other questions you can say to yourself that maybe not all records are ones you want to own. And that one, the bench points one does feel a little like that, but that was the theme of this game. The Nets knew that they were on the front end of the back-to-back in this game. They knew that they had Minnesota on Friday. Whether they felt like this really wasn't all that winnable against the Bucks, even without Giannis, or they just wanted to get rest, or the state of the NBA, how it is now, where this kind of thing is acceptable. They essentially waved the white flag, only to find out that the guys that they were going to end up rolling with were going to just kind of, for some of them, play some of their best games of the year. Patty Mills with an absolute turn back the clock effort here. He goes 8 for 16 from the field, 5 for 9 from 3, scores 23 points, gets seven rebounds against a pretty big Bucks team, dishes out 4 assists as well. You can't complain at all about his effort. Took big shot after big shot, kept them in the game, was probably one of his best games of the entire season for, a veteran that knows that he's essentially out of the rotation and maybe getting close to being out of the NBA. I mean, he's not playing for this team. It's hard to imagine there's a lot of other teams that are out there beating his door down. He's got to another season with the Nets under contract, so he'll be a Net next year. But, maybe this is kind of nearing the end of the line, and not a total knock, but, this guy's getting old. He's played a lot of seasons. That's just kind of how it works. He ends up with a really, really nice game. You get 30 minutes out of Day'Ron Sharpe, who is clearly still a work in progress, even though Nerlens Noel on the 10-day contract got the start. And then you get guys like David Duke Jr., who's really played almost no minutes this season. Drew Smith has been on the team for a few weeks. Those two guys combined for 30 points. There was a big shot after big shot sort of element to what the Nets were doing tonight. And I think if you played this game out 100 times, we don't get this kind of outcome, many of them. I think that a lot of things just sort of swung their way. I think they had just enough energy, or the requisite energy, in the second half to sort of keep their foot on the gas enough to just keep it in the game with the Bucks. But the effort was all there. So even though this is a team that knew going in that the plan was play these guys some minutes and get out of it, Harris, Curry, Mikal, Dorian Finney-Smith, these guys were not going to be long for the game, that they knew they were going to run a bench unit just pretty much the whole time. you have to, again, you commend the effort for what they had to do. And I think there's like sort of some problems with why that is like why that is just sort of okay to do in this modern NBA. Like, why is it all right for a team to just sit everybody and just basically take schedule losses? This is becoming more and more acceptable throughout the league. It feels very, very weird. It feels weird to just like have a Mikal Bridges on your team in a winnable game who's played minutes earlier in the game when you have a close game at the end, to not cycle some of these guys back in after these guys have played more minutes at high leverage than they've played all year. I get very torn about things like this. Like, on the one hand, like I said, there's a little mini excitement to start the podcast where we're like, oh, great effort. Great to see some of these young guys kind of ball out for a little bit. Cool to see they get their chance. At the same time, there's only 82 games in a regular season of basketball. Every win does kind of count. When you have these guys active, like Mikal Bridges, who's clearly their best player, by a factor of X, I don't even know what it is. It's clearly their best player. Even guys like Seth Curry, like Dorian Finney-Smith, that are going to be able to just contribute winning plays, presumably, and they haven't played, so like they should be pretty fresh. To not bring these guys back in, I do think it's just odd. Like, I just think, and it's more says about the NBA at large than it does about the Nets. Like, I think the Nets are only doing what a lot of other teams do also. Maybe not in this exact way, like where the starters play some minutes and then are gone. Most times it's like you just fully sit out everybody and you just play the guys you have. You have, nine active dudes or whatever. Like, I just don't understand why you can't at some point just say we're going to go for the win. Like, I just don't understand why at some point Mikal Bridges can't come back in the game, or Joe Harris come back in the game, or Seth Curry come back in the game. We're just like still better than the guys that are playing. I get that these guys are playing well. I know the coach speak will say, well, these are the guys that fall out of the way. We want to let us see them close it out. I just doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. And I get it's become more and more acceptable across the NBA landscape to be able to play games like this and just to not have much pushback when it comes to, oh yeah, it's a rest night and that's just kind of what happens. Every team does it. It's not the Nets. And to some degree, the Nets do it less than other teams. So I can't like totally complain, but it's just such a weird dynamic that we've created in the NBA, or that not we've created, that has been created in the NBA, where it's just like sort of acceptable to take losses or to just not bring players back in or not play your best players because there's like a rest situation or you're on the front end of the back-to-back. Like, yeah, is there some strategy to that? Sure. I also know that this game was like 2-point game with a few minutes left to go. At that point, you can win the game. So the strategy doesn't like matter at that point. There's no point, you should just be trying to win the game. Like, yeah, I know originally you said we're going to go out and get killed, and that's what we've all kind of agreed that's going to happen. But like at some point, this is an NBA. These guys are professionals. Like, you're trying to win games. I don't understand why this works. So I don't want to get like too far afield around this stuff because I get it's just part of the broader NBA landscape. I just find it very weird that this kind of, I hate to call it behavior because that sounds didactic. It's like this kind of element of the game in the NBA now is just okay. It's just okay to just throw out, random G leaguers for a game and just get crushed. And, oh, great. Ooh, they played well. That's great. And again, I'm happy that the Nets played well, but excuse me, to just know that there were other players on the bench, or this game could have gone a little differently, or they could have just tried to win with a better set of group. I don't know. I just, at some point, I think there's going to be a reckoning around the NBA with this, and that this kind of thing won't stand. And again, I think we got a little bit of a lucky outcome that the Nets were able to keep this one close. If you play this game 100 times out of 100, I think most times it's a total blowout. We're not seeing the Bucks starters anywhere close to the fourth quarter. But in this one, you get just enough of a narrative to keep it going. And I still find it just a little odd. And I still can't help but wonder if it had gone a little differently, or there was a slightly different strategy, if this just could have been a Nets win instead of a moral victory or a hard fought loss, which is what you get in the end. Takes nothing away from the effort from Patty Mills, takes nothing away from the effort from these other guys. Is nothing about that. Those guys were great. That's why we spent the whole first part talking about it. But I do wonder if something was left on the table in this game, because to me, and even at the time, it really, really felt like it. Want to talk a little bit about Cam Thomas, talk a little bit about what's coming up here for the Nets and where they stand. We'll get to all of that in a second. First, I'm going to tell you about our friends over at FanDuel. It's a perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. New customers are going to get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sports app. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Going into tonight, this one wavered back and forth on FanDuel. It was down to -9 at one point with the Giannis thing, but then all the way back up to -12 or -13 for Milwaukee. No matter which way you slice it, Nets came out on the right side of this one over at FanDuel. You got to go check out FanDuel today. Makes it super easy to get your NBA bets in. It's not just money lines or point spreads either. You can go for player props, player points, rebounds, assists. You put them all into a same game parlay to even get a bigger payout. Just some of what you're going to get over. And FanDuel, don't miss your chance to get your first no sweat first bet up to $1,000 when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, we'll close this out, talk a little Cam Thomas, and just talk. We'll throw in a little bit of the effort that we saw from some of these guys. I find the Cam Thomas situation just increasingly weird. I don't know what's happening with him. I think that I feel like sometimes we don't get enough questions asked about it. I'll check in about Jacques Vaughn. I know we had commented about Cam Thomas after last game where he was played basically no minutes, even in the loss. And Jacques Vaughn was like, well, he gave his minutes to Nerlens Noel, and he could play 0 minutes one night and 30 minutes the next night. And that was kind of what Vaughn ended up saying about the Cam Thomas situation. I will say, and I said it last game too, is that the games where Cam Thomas is a candidate to play like the most minutes are the last 2 games that they've played. And I know he played 26 in this one. And I have to tell you, even those 26 felt like a begrudging 26 minutes. Because if you look at the minutes breakdown for the rest of the team, sorry, I'm just getting choked up here about these Cam Thomas minutes. Yuta Watanabe played 29. Day'Ron Sharpe played 30. Patty Mills played 31. Drew Smith played 22. David Duke Jr. played 27. One more minute than Cam Thomas. This is weird. Like, this is just a weird situation. There's no other way to shake this out other than like they just don't like Cam Thomas. Like, I don't know another way to interpret it at this point. Unless someone tells us differently, I just don't know how you can think about this situation any more differently than they just don't like him. Like, if there's a game where he could just get out there and play 32, 33 minutes because you need his scoring, this is going to be it. Like or last game where he could have got blowout run and he just isn't part of the closing group when it comes to, they're just getting run off the court. Where they're blowing out the other team. Like, these are the times where you would think you would see more Cam Thomas, and it's just not happening. And like I said, with the begrudging minutes tonight, the rotations for him were even a little bit weird in terms of like when his minutes came. They ended up closing with him. It was kind of one of these situations like where you kind of had to close with him. He was scoring pretty easily near the end. He does finish with 21 points in 26 minutes, second leading scorer on the team, despite, playing less minutes, than a lot of other guys, even coming off the bench. I find the whole situation just a little bit odd. It's clear that the scoring for him isn't enough for whatever else they want to see from him, whether it's on court or off court. It's just not enough to get him like all the way across the finish line with real rotation minutes. I think this game was the most damning of them all. I thought the last one in the blowout where he didn't play was maybe the worst one. Weirdly, I feel like this 26-minute game is even more damning than those other ones, because this one felt like we were going to get like a locked up 30 minutes for him. And that just didn't happen. Now, maybe you think it's predicated on his game isn't enough of a team game. I think we've seen evidence that that's like not totally true all the time. But maybe that's how you feel. No assists in this game either. I think there's certain things you can look into when it comes to some of his numbers or as on the court play. I'll still contend that he can score at an elite level in the NBA, and that is worth something. I know that sometimes that's hardest to stand out among other guys because like a lot of guys have given green lights, and a lot of minutes can score lots of points. I still think that it's very clear that he can score at an elite level or at least like a step below an elite level on an NBA court. And that is worth something. And it's just something is not totally connecting with what's happening for him on the court, what's happening him with the coaching staff, where they view him maybe even long term, whether it's a message being sent or whatever it is. Again, going into this game, where would I have put Cam Thomas's minutes? I would have put him like 30, 32, just based on what they were going to do. And if I knew that he wasn't going to start and this was going to be the starter's minutes, I would have put it even higher. Like, because that's just how like you would think it's going to shake out. And it just isn't shaking out any way that makes sense to me, who's not even like the biggest Cam Thomas fan in terms of like his overall game. So it's not even that, like, where I'm not even standing super hard for the guy. It's just at this point, like Drew Smith and David Duke Jr. playing as many minutes of him, something just doesn't compute to me. So I'm not sure what happens long term here. We're recording this right after the game, so I haven't heard Jacques Vaughn's post-game presser if it was brought up, but it could have been brought up. Again, it was kind of brought up last game and was given a non-answer then. I'm not sure if we see anything change. I do not think we're going to continue to see fruitful or robust Cam Thomas minutes going forward because there's just really no evidence that's going to happen. All right, so overall, hard-fought game. Don't love the effort. Would have loved to see them pull out a W. I would have also just loved to see the NBA operate a certain different way when it comes to these games and when it comes to some of these players. And maybe it's a schedule thing and it should be more on the schedule makers and it should be on the players, or maybe it should be more on the teams to just say, hey, these are the games and we have to go out and play them. That's just not the case in the NBA at this point. And no one's going to ever fault these guys for not bringing them back in. And I still just find it a little weird because I feel like in the end, this game could have been a W. All right, we are going to get out of here. Appreciate everyone that's in YouTube right now. We'll stick around for a few extra minutes on YouTube Live. If you're listening on the podcast feed, make sure you subscribe to YouTube, to Locked On Nets YouTube. We are climbing toward 6,000 subscribers. That is the goal. Would love to get to 6,000 before the end of the season. Nets are probably going to make the playoffs. So we'll have a few extra weeks to get there as well. So make sure you are subscribed over to Locked On Nets YouTube. Adam is the one that always comes up with a great quote to finish out every episode. So I'll just say Adam Armbrecht, one of the great American poets. We'll be back again next week and in a moment on YouTube talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball. All right, live on YouTube. We'll hang out here a little bit as the start times get later. It gets a little bit harder to keep it rolling on YouTube for a long time. Take a sip of water here. If you have a question, I'm going to star a couple things that I saw from people in here. So I'm just going to pause for like 2 seconds to just grab a couple questions that people had thrown in here. So just give me 1 second. Not great podcast, obviously, being live as I read through this stuff, but when you roll solo, it's got to multitask, baby. It's hard to read the comments and read through your thoughts and read through your game stuff and talk for your 30 minutes and do everything and do it all at once. And then, excuse me, get everything straight. Okay, I grabbed a couple of questions here. Much appreciated. Oops, I grabbed one more here. Okay. All right, some old favorites here jumping in. Let me roll through some of them. Always appreciate these questions too, because it helps roll through some of this stuff. All right, first one here. Do you think Patty Mills should be in the regular rotation? No. I don't think he's going to be. I don't think the plan is for him to be. I think he knows that. I think he's just such a pro that, like, even knowing that he's out of the rotation, when he's going to play his minutes, like, the dude's just kind of an NBA lifer. And I think that's why you see this effort. And like, he can step up in these situations. I think that he's just not part of the plan in like any shape or fashion. So I do not think that this is going to move the needle on his rotation minutes at all. And I appreciate the effort and I think it's really cool. And he seems like, by all accounts, like just the greatest dude. And that's awesome. But in terms of his overall status with the team or rotation stuff, no, I don't think. He's just too small. He's too much of a liability on defense in real situations. They just have other guys that are sort of redundant that can do everything just a little bit better. So no, I don't think that's going to be. I don't think they're going to end up landing with him. There's really been there hasn't been any signal that is going to be what they want to do going forward. Do you think any of these guys see meaningful minutes tomorrow? I think they all see meaningful minutes. I think these were all just sort of NBA, wink, wink, nod, nod injuries. That's nothing seemed too serious. I think we're going to see all these guys play. If you saw them like on the bench and stuff, there's just, I don't, I mean, I could be wrong, but I just don't think that this was like any of these things are long term. It's the front end of the back to back. I think they thought they were going to lose. I think they probably they thought they saw the Minnesota game as more winnable for tomorrow night. Yeah, I think all these guys play. So look, whether it's right or wrong, I don't really know. I said it. I talked for length about this in the podcast. I get it and I don't get it. Like I do completely get it because in terms of the rest, because every team does it. Like that's kind of why I get it. I after that, I still think it's not great. Like injuries still happen. Like I'm just not totally convinced that like keeping these guys off the court increases or decreases their injury risk to the point where it's worth it. I don't think the Nets are a championship team anyway. So I don't know. I just don't get it. And I'm not even like team, get out there and dribble at all costs. Like I don't really subscribe to that. And again, it's so prevalent in the NBA that it's like almost not even worth it to talk about. Cause again, every team does it. And the Nets, for the most part, aren't anywhere close to as bad as some of these other teams. Like some of these tanking teams, it's so gross. We'll go watch a Thunder game and what they're doing. The starters change at halftime. It's just a total mess. Detroit's kind of like this. It's like if you're playing too good, the guys just come out. Like believe me, there's teams that are way. We'll follow what the Clippers did this whole season. And my God, like there's just some of these teams are way worse. But I still just don't like it. I just think it's kind of weak. I don't know, not weak, but it's just, I don't know. It doesn't seem, it seems like it's getting worse before it gets better. I don't know. That's kind of where I end up landing with this. Okay. Can I, honest thoughts on Nerlens Noel? It looks like a guy who hasn't played in a long time. He hadn't really played in a month before he played last game. He's not exactly like the scheme that the Nets have wanted to play. Like this, like they've gone from an all switching team to, and I should have mentioned this on the podcast, but there's just other stuff to talk about, but they went from an all switching team to like a soft drop zone kind of thing with Noel and Sharp. And so it's like the scheme is just all different now too, which is actually kind of amazing that they've been able to stay in some of these games because they're playing like almost like a totally different defense from what I can tell. I think he'll probably end up staying on the team. I would think just because I don't know how many more 10-day contract kind of guys are going to try out. I haven't seen anything that's made me think like, wow, there's nothing jumping off the page. It looks really raw. Like he hasn't played in a while. I think it like sometimes these teams like to bring in guys that they at least know they don't have to like coach up at this point. And I think that's probably the case with Nerlens, where it's like, hey, he's been around the block. He's played with a few teams or a bunch of teams. He kind of knows the drill. He is a professional. He seems like a good guy. Like, I think that's probably going to count for a lot. But in terms of basketball stuff, nothing's really jumped off the page for me. Effort's been fine. He tries to set a ton of screens. It's always going to be hard for him because he's pretty small or he's like really thin. But yeah, overall, no complaints, no huge praise either. And I think he probably makes it through the second 10-day only because they just need centers. And I'm not sure what's happening with Simmons. And so my guess is he sticks through this one, but I don't know. I don't know. I don't think it's going to be like because he's like totally jumping off the page. And that's just fine. Played him in some DFS lineups tonight. He did okay. Probably should have played Daron Sharp, but he was starting. And sometimes we default to the starter when it comes to stuff over on FanDuel. Okay. Let me see if I got anything else in here. I disagree. So, okay. So this is going to be funny. So can we put this a little harsher than I would have, but can we all agree that Jacques Vaughn should be jailed for these lineups? Should we lock him up? No, I don't think we should lock Jacques Vaughn up. I think sometimes this stuff, like specifically around the rest, I have a feeling sometimes this stuff comes more from front office than it does from coach. And I think that's my guess because I a guy like Vaughn, I think that my guess is he would always just want to put his best guys out there. I'm not positive about that. And I sometimes feel like this rest thing is much more of a front office kind of edict around who should and how much people should be playing. That's just my own personal opinion. I'm not 100% sure about this one, but it's hard if it's coming from the front office. I can't totally fault Vaughn for like what happened here. Like these are just the players he has. So I don't think you can look at this game and fault the lineup structure much at all, unless you like are such a huge Cam Thomas fan that you think that he should be playing tons. That could be a fault. Otherwise, I really, if the idea here was that, excuse me, no one is going to, none of these like real rotation guys are going to play any minutes. Like, I don't know. What do you do at that point? What's there to be done? Like, what do you want to have been done differently here? If the edict was these guys can only play a few minutes, which I do think that was the edict. Like after that, I don't know what else can be done. Right. Like this is who you have left. These are the guys that are going to play. The only one I can say like is the Cam Thomas thing. Like if that's because that's like the one difference, right? Other than that, I think they said, I think it came down. There was an organizational agreement that said, Mikal's going to keep his consecutive game streak going. Everyone else is going to play a few minutes and then run the bench, and you get what you get, and you don't get upset. But so I can't really fault Vaughn for that one. I don't think. All right, really appreciate everyone that's been in here. What if Cam Thomas came in solely to close games? He's a clutch bucket getter. Yeah, I don't know. Like, I get what you're saying. Like, he doesn't feel afraid of the moment. The defense is still bad. I think his decision making is pretty bad at times on offense, though it is getting better. I think he's like good on when he has the ball. Like his decision making is okay. Still takes some bad shots. I don't know. I think I just kind of want to see him develop as a player. It's not even that. It's not even making a huge case for Cam Thomas. I just find the whole situation a little weird. That's all. I just don't know if we have like enough answers about why he doesn't seem to be like sort of part of what they want to do. All right. I think that's going to be it. Got some other network stuff that I got to take care of here. Really appreciate everyone that jumped into YouTube. Probably not going to be live after tomorrow's Timberwolves game as we head into the weekend, but we will be back. Real quick, I just saw this one. What role did Josiah play in Katie's ankle injury? I will say, I know you're joking, I think, or I know, but I was bummed to see this KD thing. I still kind of root for KD. I don't know if like Nets fans are going to want to hear that. I thought he was fun to watch. I love the quotes. I love how much he loves basketball. I know it didn't end the way anyone wanted to. I get all that. I never root for injuries. So like under any circumstances, we never ever. That's good bad juju, everybody. Never ever root for injuries. But yeah, I don't know. I was kind of bummed when I saw that he had sprained the ankle, maybe out for most of the rest of the regular season. Kind of bummed me out. So do I think Josiah wet the floor and made him slip in that pregame, which looked like totally nothing at the time. If you saw the video, it's like crazy that he's going to miss weeks with this. It really didn't look that bad. But no, I was bummed. I don't know. I don't like to see these guys hurt. And now it's going to be by the way, second thing, it's going to be an all Kyrie show maybe here in Dallas for a few games because Luka got hurt as well. So it's going to be all no KD and all Kyrie. And that's the story of those guys leaving the Nets. Okay, going to get out of here. Appreciate everyone jumping into YouTube. We'll be back again next week talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.